Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Transformers TCG Deck Techs, where we dare to think outside the box and we have fun doing it. My name is Jimmy, and in this video, I'm going to show you a deck that I've been working on for a couple weeks. It's one of many decks that I've been playtesting for Gen Con, but this one stood out amongst all of those decks, and the reason is because I've played about 20 or so matches with this deck, and I have yet to lose a match. And that's actually incredible because I've been going up against, Optimus Prime Battlefield Legend decks, Lionizer decks, Insecticons, blue decks, all sorts of different types of decks. But it's yet to lose a match. I mean, I've lost games, but I have not actually lost a single match with this. And what's cool about it, though, is it uses a character that's not known to be a competitive character. And that character is Autobot Cosmos. And it's a specialist that in bot mode says, when you reshuffle your deck while this is attacking, KO the defender if it has 12 stars or fewer. So our deck is designed to get through our deck as quickly as possible so that we can trigger that ability as much as possible. Now, I've actually been seeing Cosmos being mentioned on the Transformers TCG Facebook page quite a bit recently, but players are pairing him with Lionizer, which is fine. Bold is a really great way to get through your deck, especially with Lionizer, because, Lionizer gives Bold 4. But this is a blue deck. And the way that we're going to be getting through our deck is by card draw. And the reason behind that is because the more cards you have in your hand, the fewer cards you have in your draw pile. So the fewer cards you have in your draw pile, the more often you're going to reshuffle. So that's the main idea behind this deck. But in alt mode, he has an ability that says when you flip to this mode, scrap all cards from your hand, then draw that many cards. And I found that it's not uncommon to scrap and draw 15 cards or more with this ability. So it gets kind of out of hand once you get, quite a few cards in your hand. But we're going to be focusing primarily on this ability. And you're probably asking, well, Jimmy, you just said that you beat Optimus Prime Battlefield Legend decks. I mean, he's 13 stars. How are you doing that? Well, obviously we're not going to be using Cosmos' ability on Optimus Prime. But I have another character that really helps against those types of situations. And that character is Private Firedrive. Now, this is a Battlemaster, so he's going to start in bot mode. And he has an ability that says when this attacks, you draw a card. And that's cool. We're going to be drawing a couple cards off of this guy, but the main reason why he's in here is because when he turns into the Duo Charge Electrostatic Photon Cannon, or Mouthful for short, he turns into a +3 weapon that has an ability that reads, when the upgraded character attacks, scrap any number of cards from your hand. For each one scrapped this way, the upgraded character gets +1 damage until end of turn. And of course, if this were to leave the battlefield for any reason, we put it into the KO area instead. But with the amount of card draw that we have in this deck, I have found that at least one game per match, at least, I mean, it happens more often than you would think, I have my entire deck in my hand. And there's been several times where I've attacked with Cosmos, or our third character that you're going to see in a minute, for 35 or more damage. That's insane, especially for a blue deck. So there are ways to be able to handle characters that have 13 or more stars, and this is how we do it. So we have 2 characters so far that come up to 18 stars. So we have 7 stars remaining that we can use. And the next character, it's probably predictable, but she's in a lot of defensive decks. This is a blue deck. I had to put her in here. But she also has a promo now, and I want to use her promo, and that's Flame War. And another important reason why I'm using Flame War is because she's a specialist. And the deck uses a lot of the specialist upgrades for part of the draw engine, and I'll explain that here in a minute. But in bot mode, she has an ability that says each of your characters says tough one. I mean, how can you argue with that in a blue deck? It's awesome. There's a reason why you see her everywhere. But on her other side, we actually use this ability more often than you may think. It reads, when you flip to this mode, each of your characters gets bold 1 until end of turn. Now, one of the things that you have to, pay attention to in a Cosmos deck is the number of cards you have with white icons. This deck has 10 cards with white icons on them. Now, if you come across a situation where you have, 3 cards remaining in your draw pile and you're about to attack with Cosmos, you look in your scrap pile, you look at the upgrade you have on the battlefield, and you look in your hand. Now, this deck has 10 cards with white icons, so if I see all 10 of those cards, then I know that there's no more white icons in the draw pile. So in that situation, I'll go ahead and flip Flame War to this mode to give all my characters bold 1, and Cosmos can attack and flip all 3 of those cards, triggering his ability. So this actually comes into play more often in this deck than I think any other, blue deck that I use Flame War in. But we're going to be primarily leaving her in this mode so that we can make sure that our characters stick around for a while. So that is our starting team. And now we're going to go ahead and look at the battle cards. And like I said earlier, we're going to be focusing on card draw with this deck. And this deck doesn't really have a lot of card draw cards in it, but the way that the deck works is kind of cool because of how the upgrades work with a certain action that we have. But the first card that we're going to look at is Pep Talk. It's an action with a blue icon that draws you 2 cards. So this is pretty self-explanatory. By playing this card, you actually do gain a card in your hand. There were other cards that I considered using, like Inspiring Leadership and even like Backup Plan, but I wanted to try to get as many cards in my hand as possible, and those cards just didn't work as well as Pep Talk did. But we want to try to keep our deck to 40 cards because it's a Cosmos deck, and it's very important that we have as few cards as possible in the deck. So I went ahead and just put 2 copies of Pep Talk in the deck. The next card is going to be our star card, and we have 2 stars remaining. So I went ahead and put 2 copies of Universal Network Access in the deck. And it's an action with a blue icon that reads draw 3 cards. So it's a little bit better than Pep Talk, performs the same function, and I could only put 2 in the deck because I only had 2 stars remaining. Now the next card is the draw card for this deck, and that card is Equipment Enthusiast. Now this is one of our cards with a white icon, but it's an action that says draw a card for each of your upgrades. And I put 3 copies of Equipment Enthusiast in the deck because of the upgrades that we're using in this deck. And the first upgrade that we're going to look at that works with Equipment Enthusiast's combo or draw engine is Field Communicator. And this is another one of our cards that has a white icon, and it's a utility that grants +1 damage, but it has an ability that says when you put this on a specialist, scrap the top card of your deck, you may play that card. Now this is kind of a risky card because, obviously we don't know what the top card of our deck is going to be, but the benefits of playing this card far outweigh the risk, because if we play this and we have an upgrade off the top of our deck, we just played 2 upgrades for that turn. Now that may not seem like a lot, but with the other upgrades that I'm using, it could chain into more upgrades and make it so that Equipment Enthusiast draws you tons of cards. So I went ahead and put 3 copies of Field Communicator in the deck. And the next upgrade is MultiTool. And it's a weapon that gives +1 damage, has a blue icon, and it reads, when you put this on a specialist, you may play an upgrade. So it works similarly to Field Communicator in a way where we're trying to play as many upgrades as possible, but imagine playing Field Communicator on Flame War, which tops you into a multi-tool that you play on Cosmos, which then allows you to play another Field Communicator on Cosmos, and then you flip you see how this is going to go. So I went ahead and put 3 copies of MultiTool in the deck, and the next upgrade is slowly but surely turning into one of my favorite upgrades. And the way that it interacts with these is pretty awesome, and that is Extra Padding. It's an armor with a blue and a green icon, so we can grab it if we flip it when we're battling. But it grants our character Tough 1. But what's cool about this is, when you put this on a character, you may play another copy of extra padding. Now, that doesn't have to be on the same character. It could be on another character if you want to, spread the tough around. But if you want to, up to 3 extra paddings can fit into 1 armor slot. So you could give this all to, 1 character if you wanted to. But I went ahead and put 3 copies of extra padding in the deck. And what's cool is, the combinations of using these upgrades is awesome because, like I said earlier, you could Field Communicator off the top. Maybe you get a MultiTool, but if you also could flip an extra padding off the top. And since you're playing that off the top, if you have one or both of the other copies in your hand, you can play those as well. So you're playing tons of upgrades on your turns when you're using these cards here. So that's basically the draw engine to the deck, and it's super effective. I mean, like I said, I've been playing this deck for a few weeks, and I think there may have been 1 game where I didn't draw a bunch of cards using that engine. So, but the next, few cards are going to, help us deal some normal damage because it actually makes a difference in certain circumstances. So the first upgrade that we're going to look at is Energon Axe. I mean, it's a phenomenal weapon. It's got a blue icon. You can only put this on damaged characters, but, our characters are going to take damage. I mean, even though it's a blue deck, there's tough in the deck, heavily defensive deck, we're going to be taking damage. So, but it's a +3 weapon that gives our character Pierce 2. So awesome weapon. Probably my favorite weapon in the game. But the reason why this is important is because there's going to be times where, our characters are going to be attacking into opposing characters that only have a couple health left. And we don't really want to use or waste Cosmos's ability on those characters. So having a weapon that will grant us Pierce 2 is awesome for those circumstances. So, but I went ahead and only put 2 copies of Energon Axe in the deck because, again, I'm trying to keep the deck to 40 cards. The next one, however, is going to really help our our smaller characters to participate. And that is Laser Cutlass. And it's a weapon with a blue icon that reads put only on characters that have 7 stars or fewer. So we can play this on Firedrive, we can play this on Flame War, and it gives +1 damage and Pierce 3. So it's a little bit better than Energon Axe on our smaller characters because of the Pierce 3. Again, there might be a situation where, an opposing character's at 3 health or less, and we don't want to use Cosmos on them. So, we slap this on one of our little guys, and we attack that character instead. So I went ahead and put 3 copies of Laser Cutlass in the deck. And the next card, which is primarily going to be used on our little guys, but it can be used on Cosmos, of course, and that is The Bigger They Are. And it's an action with a blue icon that reads one of your characters gets +2 damage until end of turn. While it's attacking an enemy this turn that has more stars than it, it gets Pierce 4. So this will help Cosmos, against those characters that are 13 stars or more. Or, we throw this on one of our smaller characters to finish off an opposing character so Cosmos doesn't have to attack into it. So I went ahead and put 3 copies of The Bigger They Are in the deck. Okay, so those cards are going to help us, deal some normal damage when it matters. So now we're going to go ahead and look at some of the more utility cards. The first one we're going to look at is Unconventional Flying Object. And it's an action that has a blue icon that reads, flip one of your spaceships to bot mode and then flip it back to alt mode. Now, obviously, Cosmos is a spaceship, and you can only play this if he's in alt mode. So don't think that you can use this as an escape route. It doesn't work that way. But what I found is really cool about this card, besides, obviously later in the game being able to scrap a bunch of cards and then drawing a bunch of cards, is if you're going second and it's your first turn and you do not like your hand at all, I mean, everybody's had that situation before, but you have this in your hand, you can actually play this and basically mulligan your first hand. So, you draw your card for the turn, you have 4 cards in hand. You play this, you flip Cosmos twice, and you scrap your hand, and then you draw a new set of 3 cards. Then, of course, you attack with Firedrive. That's your 4th card. You still have 4 cards at the end of the turn in which you use this. I mean, obviously, you haven't played an upgrade and you didn't play an action that really provided any kind of damage or actual card draw. But it's really cool to have that option. But I went ahead and put 3 copies of Unconventional Flying Object in the deck. And the next one is Quartermaster, another one of our white icon cards, and it's an action that reads choose one. Move an upgrade from one of your characters to another one. Or you may put a Battlemaster upgrade from your KO area onto one of your characters. So this has, a dual use, and we actually use that first ability quite a bit in this deck because we can trade MultiTool, or we can trade Field Communicator to get that trigger again if we, feel that we, need to try to get some other cards besides what's in our hand. I mean, obviously we're going to have a lot of cards in our hand theoretically with this deck, but there's going to be situations where we, don't quite have what we need and we need to try to get those. So I went ahead and just put 2 copies in the deck because of all the card draw we have. And while Firedrive is amazing, we don't necessarily need him to win. So I just went ahead and put 2 copies of Quartermaster in the deck. And the next card, which kind of works like this, and I actually mentioned it, that is Escape Route. It's, our last white icon card, I believe, and it has an ability, it's an action that reads flip one of your characters from bot mode to alt mode. And this is going to be, used, I think, pretty much solely on Cosmos in order to cycle our hand. And it also has a green icon, so we can grab this when we flip cards while battling. But because, again, I'm trying to keep it to 40 cards, I only put 2 copies of Escape Route in the deck. Okay, so these are our utility cards, and these will help our characters do a little bit of extra normal damage in the cases where it's needed. And we only have a few cards left in the deck. And this will, the next card will help us make sure that Cosmos sticks around for a while. I mean, I know he's got 21 hit points, and the deck actually has 41 hit points total. But we want to make sure that Cosmos isn't taking, tons and tons of damage. And that card is Bravery. It's a utility with a blue icon that gives our character Brave. So, I actually had thought about using Stealthiness instead of Bravery, because with Stealthiness, I could just play it on Cosmos and, it will make it so that he's protected pretty much throughout the entire game. But I also felt that I wanted to use, Bravery on Firedrive so that I could have the option of playing Field Communicator on Cosmos. And it has a blue icon, so it makes it just a tad bit better when flipping on defense. So I went ahead and put 3 copies of Bravery in the deck. The next card that we're going to look at is one of the 2 necessary evils that I call them in the deck, and that is Security Checkpoint. And it's an action with 2 blue icons that reads each player reveals their hand and scraps all upgrades from it. Now, you might run into situations where you have all actions in your hand, and it wouldn't be a bad idea to play this in those situations, but it's in there primarily for the 2 blue icons. So I went ahead and put 3 copies of Security Checkpoint in the deck. And the last card, which actually gets played more often than you would think as an upgrade, is Handheld Blaster. And it's a weapon with 2 blue icons that gives our character Bold 1. So this actually performs a similar function to what Flame War does in situations where we have more cards in our draw pile than we can flip normally with Cosmos in order to trigger his ability. So, there are situations where, you'll have 4 cards left in your draw pile. You put this on Cosmos, you flip Flame War, and you're able to flip all 4 of those cards, triggering Cosmos' ability. So this actually gets played as an upgrade in this deck. So I went ahead and put 3 copies of Handheld Blaster in the deck. Okay, guys, so that is the main battle deck, and now I'm going to show you what I've done with the sideboard. The sideboard kind of metamorphosizes the deck into a deck that wants to do just normal damage. Situations where you would want to do that is if you go up against 4 or 5 wide decks where Cosmos' ability, isn't nearly as effective. But the sideboard character that we're going to use is used primarily to sideboard out Cosmos, but still works really great with the deck strategy, and that's Nemesis Prime. On his bot mode side, he has an ability that says, when you reshuffle your scrap pile into your deck, put the bottom card of your deck face down under this. This has +3 damage for each card under him. So along with the deck strategy, the more cards you have in your hand, the fewer you have in your draw pile, the more often you shuffle. So we're going to be able to put cards underneath Nemesis very quickly and very often. Now on his other side, he has an ability that says, when you flip to this mode, your opponent chooses one of their characters and does 2 damage to it. So that's a handy ability. Free damage is free damage, but we're going to be primarily focusing on Nemesis Prime's bot mode side. Now keep in mind, when you sideboard in Nemesis Prime, it's probably going to be for Cosmos, and in that situation we're going to be losing a star. Nemesis Prime is 12 stars, Cosmos is 11 stars, so when we sideboard in Nemesis, we're going to have to take out one of the Universal Network Access cards. We're also probably, we're going to be sideboarding out the Unconventional Flying Objects. We may, sideboard out some of the Specialist upgrades since we're going down to 1 Specialist, but, just keep that stuff in mind when you're sideboarding in Nemesis. And the first card we're going to look at is Heavy Handed. And it's an action with a blue icon that reads, one of your characters gets +2 damage until end of turn. While it's attacking an enemy this turn that has fewer stars than it, it has Pierce 4. So this is primarily going to be used with Nemesis. He's going to be able to utilize that Pierce 4 more than the other characters can. But there are going to be situations where Firedrive will be attacking into a character that's 6 stars or less. And even Flame War will have opportunities where she will be attacking into a character that's 4 stars. So I went ahead and put 3 copies of Heavy Handed in the deck because it's really going to help us, deal that normal damage. The next card we're going to look at is Sparring Gear. And it's an armor that has an orange and a green icon, so we'll be able to grab this card if we flip it while battling. But this gives our character Tough 2. And the reason why I put this in is because after sideboarding, our opponent is inevitably going to be putting in additional upgrade hate because, our main deck wants to use upgrades as much as possible. So, our opponent's probably going to be putting in more cards that will take care of upgrades. So we wanted to try to add, a couple more upgrades just because, we want to be able to have upgrades on our characters. So I went ahead and just put 2 copies of Sparring Gear in the deck. Now, our next 5 cards are going to help us deal with opposing upgrades. And the first card we're going to look at is Vaporize. And it's an action with a blue icon that says scrap an enemy upgrade. And I went ahead and put all 3 copies of Vaporize in the sideboard. And you're probably wondering why I don't have them in the main board. Well, the reason for that is because Cosmos really does not care what you have. Because if he's attacking you and he reshuffles his deck while he's attacking you and your 12 stars are under, you're going to get knocked out. The other characters are going to be dealing primarily pierce damage. So, we don't really care about opposing armors with them. So I just felt that Vaporize was just a better fit for the sideboard, especially after sideboarding in Nemesis, where, we're going to try to take out opposing armors and whatnot. The next card that I'm using to take care of opposing upgrades is Disarm. And it's an action with a blue icon that reads, return all upgrades on a character to their owner's hand. Now, the reason why this is in here, this actually didn't show up in my sideboard until, probably after 15 matches or so, but there were, quite a few situations where I was like, I really wish that I had a Disarm in my hand because I need to get rid of, both of those upgrades this turn. Or, in the case of playing against like Dreadwing or Predaking, I'm like, I just wish that I could get rid of all those weapons. I don't know how prevalent, Predaking and Dreadwing are going to be at Gen Con, but, you know, I always feel that, you know, it helps to have a card in your sideboard to help with those situations where you're just wishing you had that card in your hand. So I went ahead and put 2 copies of Disarm in the sideboard because obviously I only had 2 slots left. So that is the sideboard, and that is the deck. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys can actually put this deck together and play around with it, because it is a lot of fun. And just the look on your opponent's face when you, you know, you scrap your entire deck to Firedrive and, you know, deal 40 damage with Cosmos. I mean, that's just, it's priceless. But go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Check out my Patreon account, and never forget, you can win if you dare. So take care now, guys.